Alright, so this problem is going to cover factoring trinomials. And the main thing that we need to know about factoring trinomials is where it comes from. Now, factoring trinomials essentially comes from the FOIL method here. So, quick refresher, what does FOIL mean? Now, remember, FOIL is just an acronym, and it tells us the order in which to multiply two binomials together. Alright, so we're looking at two binomials here. Let's just put in some random numbers. Alright, some random terms inside here. But what the F stands for, the F tells us to multiply the first terms in our binomial. So the first term in this one, the first term in this one. And what the O tells us to do, so O stands for outside or outer. So if you're taking a look at these as one entire thing, if you're looking at the outside of it, so kind of like the edges of it, you would be looking at this term here and then this one. Right? So that's what your outside stands for. You would multiply those next. I would then stand for inside or inner. So if we're thinking about inside or inner, we're thinking about here, inside in the middle. So we would be talking about these two terms here. And then we have the L, which stands for last, which would mean the last term in each one of these binomials, and we would multiply those next. So taking a look at that order then, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to take this trinomial and we're trying to factor it. And they will be factored into these two binomials here. So then what we need to look for here is, okay, well, how can we factor this? Let's see how we can break it apart. Now what we need to keep in mind is when it comes to factoring trinomials here, we normally focus first on the first term. And our first term is x squared. Now, this first term here comes from multiplying the first terms in these two polynomials. So then what we need to think about is what times what would give me an x squared. And I need to sit there and rack my brain and think, okay, well, how do I get an x squared when multiplying? And we need to remember that when it comes to multiplying x's together, that comes from the product rule. When we're multiplying like bases, the product rule says that we add exponents. So if I want to get x squared, so essentially two of them, well, I need two x's, right? X times x gives us x squared. Then what we do after figuring out our first two terms is we take a look at our last term here. Because this L, this last, we get from multiplying the two last ones together. Right, so to figure out what goes in those spots, we need to look at the last term of our polynomial. Now, the last term of our polynomial is a 30. So then we need to think, okay, well, what times what is going to give us a 30? So let's see, we need to list all of our different options. So we have 1 times 30. We have 2 times 15. We have 3 times 10. We have, let's see, 5 times 6. All right, so these are all of the different possible combinations of numbers that would multiply to give us 30. Now, what we are looking for, and this is an important rule, is that we need the combination of factors that multiply to get 30, but would add or subtract to get our middle term. Now, take a look at our middle term here. Our middle term, we have a negative 1x. So we're specifically looking at our middle coefficient, which is the number, the negative 1. So taking a look at these four different combinations that we have, which ones would add or subtract to get a 1? For example, 30 minus 1, that would not give us a 1. 15 minus 2 would not be a 1, or 15 plus 2. The only combination that would possibly work is the 5 and the 6. Because 6 minus 5 is a 1. So that tells me I'm going to use the 5 and the 6. Those are going to fit into these two spaces right here. And honestly, it doesn't matter where you fit them. You can put the 5 in one, the 6 in the other one. What matters is the signs that go in front of them. So I'm just going to put the 5 over here, the 6 over here. And we're going to figure out what sign goes in between the x and the 5, and then the x and the 6. So it's either a plus or a minus. Now, one good rule to start with when it comes to trying to figure out what your signs are is that whatever sign your middle term has, the bigger number out of your factors is going to have that sign every time. So here my middle term is a negative. So out of the 5 or a 6, 6 is bigger, right? So that means the negative is going to go with the 6 for sure. The only thing we need to figure out is for this term here, do I have a plus or a minus in between? Now let's think about this for a second. So we get this last term by multiplying the last two terms in each one of these binomials. So we know that this one over here is a negative 6. We're not sure yet what this one is, but we do know that this last times this last is going to give us the last one here. So is a negative 6 times a positive 5 going to give us negative 30? Or is a negative 6 times a negative 5 going to give us negative 30? Now, a negative times a positive is negative, where a negative times a negative is positive. So we want the one that's going to give us a negative. So we need the negative and the positive combination. So therefore, we need to put a plus over here. And just to double check here, so do make sure a positive 5 times a negative 6 is negative 30, and a positive 5 plus a negative 6 is a negative 1. So this is the solution here. We have factored our trinomial, and it does factor to x plus 5 times x minus 6. If we do want to check our work, we could multiply this back out, just following the FOIL method, or just distributing x times everything in the second one, 5 times everything in the second one, and we should get our original problem. So technically, when it comes to factoring, we can check our work every time to make sure that we are right.